Do you have ambitions to write and publish a book, but you feel like you don't know where to start? Well, keep listening because help is here. Welcome to another episode of Content Creators Unite, the show where we discuss all things content creation. If you want to learn how to grow your business using your blog, newsletters, maybe a book, and more, hey, you're in the right place. I'm your host, John Clements. Our guest for today's episode is Terry Whalin. Terry is an editor and author of more than 60 books, and he's written for more than 50 magazines. In fact, several of Terry's books have sold over 100,000 copies. So today we're going to actually drill down on one of those books. It's called The 10 Publishing Myths, Insights Every Author Needs to Succeed. So Terry, welcome to the podcast.
John, wonderful to be here with you today.
I'm excited to have you on. I'm excited to talk about this. Before we dive into these myths that authors need to know about, though, can you just share a little bit about your background and how you got into writing and editing as a career?
Yeah, great question. It was actually a high school English teacher that noticed something in my writing, encouraged me to join the newspaper writing staff. So I joined. I did that. They started me off in the sports area, and I'm kind of a non-sports person, so I had to learn all the terminology and all that kind of thing to be able to do that. But ultimately, I became the editor of my high school newspaper in Peru, Indiana. I went to Indiana University to study journalism, and I really thought I was a hotshot writer back then. I joined the campus newspaper. We had about 100 on the campus newspaper staff, and I think I rewrote my first story for that editor about 5 times, and it was like a couple paragraphs when it appeared. So I quickly learned I had a lot to gain by being there at Indiana and writing stories and that kind of thing on the campus newspaper. Um, Back then, that's basically what I was doing. I mean, much more than my classes, I was focused on writing stories and such for that newspaper. I joined a social fraternity on the campus, was out drinking the night before, and there were about 30 of us sitting there on our old Royal typewriters, and I couldn't get my fingers on the right keys. And every time I made a mistake, I said to myself, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ. And this little blonde haired girl that was sitting next to me, she said, "Oh, Terry, don't say that about Jesus, because one of these days when you really need him, you'll call out for him and he won't be there." And I thought, what's this? I'm a Christian. I go to church when I'm at home. I read the Bible in church when I'm at home. John, I really knew nothing about Christianity back then. She encouraged me to go to a little bookstore a couple blocks off the Indiana campus. They had pretty cards and books, and maybe I'd find a book that interested me. So I wandered down there a few days later. I bought this book called Jesus the Revolutionary. I thought, how in the world could Jesus be a revolutionary? And I took that book back to my room, read that book, and it showed me a different side of Jesus than I'd ever seen before. About that time, some people invited me to this little gathering in downtown Bloomington. People were sitting on scraps of carpets with little candles lit, and those people had something that I didn't have. And so I got a Bible, and I basically changed the direction of my life. I thought I was going to be a newspaper reporter. That's what I was going to work for the Indianapolis Star or the Chicago Tribune, one of those places. Instead, I joined this group called Wycliffe Bible Translators and trooped off to Guatemala. I actually have a New Testament that's on my shelf because I worked with the Southwest Cachiquel people. I wandered back to my writing, writing for magazines. Actually went to a little writers conference, and I always encourage people to go to writers conferences. That's a great way to get connected to this whole publishing world. And while I was out at that conference, an editor said to me, Terry, I've got a problem. And I always listen when these editors tell me their problem. And she said she worked at David C. Cook, and they had a whole line of children's books. And their mission as a company was to guide children to go into the world and be telling people about Jesus. She said, "What kind of ideas do you have, Terry?" And at that time, my kids were little, and I was reading picture books to them, and I knew that Stephen Lawhead is what he writes his fantasy under, but he had a set of children's books called Howard, had a hot air balloon, Howard had a spaceship, had these real pictures combined with a cartoon character. And so I said, what if we did that with with our real pictures from Wycliffe, combined it with a cartoon character to show kids that they could do different occupations? She said, oh, that's a great idea, Terry. Write that up and send that to me. So I made a little note. I went home, wrote that up, and sent it to her. And that ultimately became my first book that was published, a little children's book called When I Grow Up, I Can Go Anywhere for Jesus in 1992. And that plunged me into the whole book writing area. And I like to tell people, John, that I'm in book publishing basically because I know books change people's lives. And I know that firsthand because I read this book years ago that changed my life, changed the direction of my life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am familiar with Wycliffe, by the way, because our business actually we sponsor a person who's doing work with Wycliffe on a monthly basis. So I'm glad you were part of that too. It's a great organization. So you talk about books that change lives, and you've written, well, 60 books, but one in particular that I think could change some authors' lives is one you were kind enough to send me, and I did read it, and it's a wonderful book. It's called 10 Publishing Myths. And in case you're wondering, it only takes about an hour and a half to read, but it has so much good information in it. We're only going to scratch the surface in this podcast. So anyone listening, I encourage you, if this is at all interesting to you, just go out and get that book and take a look because it's wonderful. So I wanted to dive into it. So why did you write this book, this 10 Publishing Myths? And then what do you hope people do after they read it?
Yeah, I wrote this book because as an editor now, I talk to authors all the time, and many of them have unrealistic expectations about what's going to happen with their book. From being in publishing a long time, I know that so much of the publishing process is outside of anything that I can control as an author. Um, but I was trying to help authors understand that there were a number of things that they can do, that they can practically do to actually sell books and attract readers and get out into the market. So that's basically why I put that book together.
And then you've got basically 10 publishing myths, although spoiler alert, there's actually 11. Yeah. So how did you come up with these various myths?
They're basically things that people tell me all the time. And so it was pretty easy to come up with 10 of them. And you're right, I do have an 11th myth. And that's because Alice Kreider, who wrote me an endorsement for the book, when she sent it, she said, Terry, you're missing the 11th myth. I'm like, okay, Alice, I'll bite. What's the 11th myth? She said, well, the 11th myth should be that if I send my book to Oprah Winfrey, she'll book me on her show. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's a pretty good myth. And so what I decided to do when I was writing the book and we were designing it, I wrote that 11th chapter. And I give that away free. If people go to terrylinks.com/11th myth, 11th myth, it takes you over to a website. You can put your first name and email address in, and then I'll send you that chapter free. That's part of what I'm offering here.
Nice. Yeah, I did notice that. So I did read your book, but I haven't gotten the 11th myth yet. So now I know what it is. But so obviously in a half hour, we're not going to get through all 10 myths, but I do want to, poke and prod at a few of them. One of the things you mentioned in the book is that every author needs a platform. And this is interesting to me because it's probably not intuitive or just blatantly obvious in every case. It's maybe not something if you're going to sit down and write a book. So can you just explain what a platform is and why it's so important for an author to have one?
Yeah, John. A platform is really your connection to the reader out there, and we all need those connections to readers, whether we inherently realize it or not, because it's the author at the end of the day. Sure, the publisher has they love your book. They're going to make the book, get it out there, but it's really the author and your connections to those readers that's really at the end of the day going to help you sell your book and really gain those fans of people that love you. So everybody needs that platform in in their in their writing experience. Um, my wake up moment, John, in this area happened in 2007. I was running a little literary agency in Arizona back then, and Mark Victor Hansen, the co-author on Chicken Soup for the Soul, invited me to come out to Los Angeles. He was having this event called Mega Book Marketing University. So I went out there and I took pitches from people, but I also decided to sit there with all 400 people that were there and listen to the different speakers. Now, at that point in my life, I'd written about 50 books for traditional publishers. So publishers were paying me advances. They were making pretty books. They were putting them in the bookstore, all that kind of thing. But when you do that kind of thing, publishers will send you a financial statement once a year, maybe quarterly, about how you're doing. All of my statements back then were in the minus category. I wasn't making any money on my books. I couldn't really figure out. I knew I must be doing something wrong, but what in the world was I doing wrong? And it about halfway through that conference is almost like I woke up and I understood what was wrong. One of the speakers was the other co-author on Chicken Soup for the Soul, Jack Canfield. And Jack has this book that I have on my shelf here called The Success Principles. It's really, what does it take to be successful? Well, the very first success principle says that I will take 100% responsibility for my own success. Now, none of us want to take 100% responsibility. We want somebody else to do it, some publisher, some marketing person, please, somebody other than us. But I decided during that event, I was going to take 100% responsibility for my own success. Now, back then, I had a terrywhalin.com website, but I was doing almost nothing else to be telling people about my book. And that was the area where I really had a deficit. And so I started to blog. I've been blogging every week now since like 2004. My blog has over 1,700 entries in it. I found this article about a year ago that listed the top 27 content producers out there. And my name was one of those top 27 because I've got this huge volume of content out there. They say there's over 600 million blogs, and they chose mine as one of those 27. And it's not that I'm doing anything magical, but I do blog every week. I'm consistent. And that's one of the key qualities that every writer has to do. You have to be doing something and then doing it consistently in order to be able to reach your reader. And that's what this whole platform thing is all about.
Yeah, and to me, as someone who owns their own business, like there was so much crossover between what you're trying to do with promoting a book and what I'm trying to do growing a business because, you know, you have to promote yourself. You just have to. No one is going to do it for you. And so that's when you mentioned in the book, the success principle of you need to uh, decide that you're 100% responsible for your success. That really spoke to me because that's so true whether you're writing a book or owning a business or doing anything worthwhile. Like that's just what you have to do.
Well, and people forget, John, that those Chicken Soup for the Soul authors, they were rejected over 160 times. I mean, that's a lot of rejection. And they finally found a little publisher in South Florida to publish the first Chicken Soup for the Soul books. They told their publisher they were going to sell 1 million books in the first year. And their publisher laughed at them. They never sold 1 million copies of anything at that point. They thought that was ridiculous. It took them a year and a half. And part of the thing that Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen talk about is they practiced what they call rule of 5. They got up every day and they did 5 things to be telling people about their book. They did a podcast, a radio show, a live event, a guest blog post, a newspaper article. I mean, there's dozens of things you can do, but they took action every single day in order to be able to do that. Now, Chicken Soup for the Soul books, they've sold millions of those books. And it's because they started and they just continued to this day doing what they can to be telling people about their book.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to circle back real quick to something you just mentioned, um, that they've been rejected, what, over 160 times? Is that what you said?
They were rejected
Yeah.
160 times before they finally found a publisher.
And I'm guessing if you have written 60 books and written for 50 magazines, you've probably been rejected a lot of times as well.
I'm rejected a lot. I am. And what I've learned, I mean, even as an acquisitions editor, I will send people my publishing contract, and they'll look at it and they'll write back and say, Terry, I think I'm going to go in a different direction. I'm going to self-publish, or I'm going to go with another publisher. So, I'm more in that loss, really, to be honest, John, because I've invested a lot in this author to try to get them a book publishing contract from a New York publishing house. But what I've learned, and this is really the advice that Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen did, is whenever you get rejected, you basically use one word to spur you forward, and that word is next. It's like, oh, this one didn't work. Where's the next one? Where's the next opportunity? Where's the next author that I can work with? Where's the next publisher that I can publish with? And that's the journey that all of us are on, really, is to find the right reader, the right fit for us so that we can succeed. I mean, repeatedly, I learned that I can't control, there's a lot in the world that I can't control, but I can control one person, and that's me.
Yeah, and I feel again, this is there's so much crossover to owning your own business, writing a book, being rejected. Like not every person I talk to hires me and uses my services, but and you speak about this in your book, this idea that it doesn't it's not necessarily personal. It doesn't mean you wrote a bad book. It doesn't mean your magazine article isn't up to par. Maybe they just published a book or an article about that exact subject and they don't need one for a while. Maybe who knows? Who knows what the case is? But anyway, to your point, like, you can't control it. Doesn't mean that you're a failure. It just means now I can go pursue the next opportunity.
And there's a lot of reasons why books get rejected. I mean, I've sat in these publication board meetings where publishers are making decisions about which books to publish. When I worked at David C. Cook, the chief operating officer would sit there. We had these big books, with tons of books that we were going through. And periodically he would pipe up and he'd say, "Oh, Terry, this is really a good book. We could sell two of them, one to me and one to somebody else." Well, whenever he said that, that was the death knell for that particular book. It's like, okay, let's flip the tab. We're going on to the next book because we weren't trying to sell two of anything. So it was like really, really awful when you got that from the chief operating officer.
Oh, yeah, that's like a gut punch. So to your point, we like if you've written a book, there's so much in the publishing process you cannot control. But there are things you can control, and that's where the 10 publishing myths come in. One of the things you mentioned in your book is that you encourage new or first-time authors not to write a book for everyone. So explain that a little bit. Why shouldn't I write a book that everyone would enjoy? Doesn't that mean more sales?
Well, that would to a degree, but no book is for everyone. And so if you say in your proposal or in your pitch that my book is for everyone, that shows me that you really don't know who your reader is. And so you often have a primary audience, a secondary audience, and a tertiary audience. So you have different degrees, those audiences, but you have to identify somebody's going to definitely be in the bullseye of who you're trying to get in the audience. And that's important for you to know that so that you can get out there and reach into them and touch them on a regular basis. In every chapter in my book, I include what I call a myth buster action and that's a practical thing that every author can do because, sure, I can't control whether a bookstore owner will carry your book or not when the publisher pitches them. But I can control when my newsletter goes out and that I do that, have a newsletter for one thing, and then I use it on a regular basis. So there's a lot of practical things like that every author can do. The easy way that I want people to get this book, John, is I've created a place. If people go to publishingoffer.com, just publishingoffer.com. That'll take you to a website where they can get this book from me for only $10. That includes the shipping, along with over $200 worth of bonuses that they get from me. So I really try to make it easy for people to get the book by going to publishingoffer.com.
Yeah, and I read the book. I read it last weekend. I would highly recommend it. One of the great things too that especially appreciate, not just your insight, but you have read so many books about writing and you list a ton of them. So I have like a reading list now of like 5 or 10 books that I'm going to go out to go read now. But it's great because I didn't know any of those books existed. So the fact that you're sharing of your knowledge like that is wonderful.
Well, John, I realize myself that my ability to succeed in the market is limited, but I've learned so much. I mean, my my success stands on the shoulders of all the people that have taught me. So I try to pass that along is what I'm doing.
Yeah, I love it. I do want to tackle one more myth from your book, and this has to do with how you choose to publish your book. So there are different routes, right? There's self-publishing, there's going with a traditional publishing house, there's other ways to do it. So talk to me a little bit about self-publishing. Is that a good option for an author to do? And if you do choose self-publishing, like how would you go about making sure that you still have a quality book at the end of the process?
Yeah, there's a lot of self-publishing going on out there. And the challenge with that is that you're doing it all yourself. And so you have to figure out, how to how to write a good book, how to design a good book, how to get a good cover, how to have the back cover. Do you have the barcode right on the back of the book? I mean, there's a lot of detail with publishing a book. Um, so sure, you can self-publish. I mean, I work at Morgan James, a New York publishing house. Our books are sold into 98% of the bookstores in North America, including the brick and mortar stores. So very broad distribution is one of the key things I think that we do. Amazon is a big customer of Morgan James, but they're only 24% of our overall business. So the way I look at it, you publish with Amazon, you're missing 76% of what we do for the book out there. We are actually in between the self-publishing and traditional houses. We call ourselves an independent publisher. You control your rights with us. You still retain those where you don't usually with a traditional publisher. We work with you so that we help you to be able to market the book and design the cover and all those kinds of things to get the book out there. We have a whole huge process that I talk about the different way that Morgan James is out there, but we've been around over 20 years, 29 New York Times bestsellers, 200 Wall Street Journal bestsellers, great reputation out there in the market. So, if anybody's interested in a book, I'd always love to talk to people about what we do.
Awesome. Yeah, and that was actually leads into my next question, which is great. So thank you. You are an acquisitions editor, and you're also an author. So you've kind of seen the whole publishing process from all sides. And you mentioned the number of best-selling books that your current company has published. So there must be some kind of formula for writing a best-selling book, right? And if so, would you share it with us?
I don't think there is a formula. That's part of the thing that I've learned over the years. All of us basically in publishing are great experimenters. We're trying different things because what's going to work for you is going to be different than what's going to work for me because maybe you find your audience over on YouTube and you've got this huge audience that you've built over there. Maybe I find mine doing something else. I mean, the other day I learned that one of our children's books, a picture book that we did, we sold 10,000 copies of that picture book last Christmas. Now, most picture books would sell maybe several hundred copies, over the lifetime of the book. So to tell 10,000, it's like, how in the world did we do that? So I asked our founder how that happened. he said, "Oh, this author Terry has some connection to the military." And so they used their connection to get that book into every commissary in the world, and it got in there about Christmas time. And so people were looking for books for their kids, so they bought this book. So, it's that kind of action that every author really needs to explore. Who do they know? How can they get to somebody that they can know, and then use that connection to help them be able to spread the message of their book? It's different for every book, but there are basically practices of success. So learn those practices and then keep trying those.
Yeah, I feel, and again, this goes so much. This applies to running a business, doing marketing, even doing selling. Like you can improve your odds of success, but there's always that element that's out of your control.
So much of it's outside of my control. I mean, I've written a number of book proposals, and I always believe that's the place that many authors miss, that they really should start, because that book proposal is essentially your business plan of who's your audience, what are you going to do to sell the book, who's your competition, all those kinds of things you build into this proposal. As a frustrated editor years ago, John, I wrote this book called Book Proposals That Sell: 21 Secrets to Speed Your Success. Now, that book has over 150 five-star reviews. It's helped people get an advance, find an agent, find a publisher. But the book was out of date. So, because so much of publishing has changed. So a few years ago, I did a revised edition of this book that's out there, and people can get that edition from me for free, the ebook version. All they do is go to bookproposals, plural, .ws, bookproposals.ws, and they'll see the cover, some type about the book, and this big button that says free book. So why do I give away the ebook version, the full text? I give it away because at Morgan James, we've learned that if you get that ebook version and start to read that ebook version, there's a high probability that you're going to turn and buy the print copy of the book. So we lose nothing. Actually, we give our authors those email addresses so they can grow their email list, which is another unusual thing we do. But by giving away that free ebook version, it actually drives print book sales and helps our authors get more emails for their newsletter list. So it's an unusual thing that Morgan James is doing in that process to try to help our authors get their book out there and be successful.
Yeah, that is unusual, but I love it. I love leading with value. That's what I try to do in my business, and I think long term is a good strategy. So Terry, it's been wonderful talking with you. I could talk with you for hours. We got to wrap it up so our listeners can go about their day. So you've given a bunch of links where people can go get resources. We will capture those and get those in the show notes. Don't worry. But where can people go to learn more about you?
Well, probably one of the best places to learn about me is to go to terrywhalin.com or my blog, which is on Blogspot. I'd subscribe to I'd encourage you to your listeners to subscribe to my blog. They can get it on their email every week. Get on my newsletter list. I'm sending that every week. That consistency and that perseverance is really foundational, I think, in the publishing business.
All right, cool. Well, we'll definitely have that information as well. As much as I can find, I'll put in the show notes so people can go and sign up for those and get those resources. So again, thanks again, Terry. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed the show today, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out any future episodes. I bring on amazing guests just like Terry. I get them to share their secrets with you so that you can grow your business, so you can write your books, so you can go out and make your mark on the world. And so with that, I hope you have a great day, and we'll see you next time on the Content Creators Night podcast.